Our scripture reading today comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 11, verses 1 through 9. This is a passage that pretty much just follows the story of Noah and the flood. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. As they had migrated from the east, they came upon a plain in the land of Shinar, and they settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city, and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we shall be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the mortals had built. And the Lord said, "Look, they are one people, and they have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will be impossible to them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language there, so that they will not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore it was called Babel, because there the Lord had confused the languages of all the earth, and from there the Lord had scattered them abroad upon the face of the earth. God add his blessing to the reading of the word. This is one of the oldest stories in the Bible. It was originally told to explain why human beings speak so many different languages. And it all takes place in ancient Babylon. I mean, even before there was a Babylon. So in modern-day Iraq, somewhere there on the plains of Shinar, the people gathered and decided to build a city. They had the technology now. They knew how to cook the bricks, how to bake them and make them tough. They had the slime or the bitumen that they use as a mortar there, and they decided, let us build a tower up to heaven. And this way we will be remembered. They built the tower, and God came to see, and the story, of course, ends with the people scattered across the earth speaking different languages, and the city there being named Babel, because that is where people's languages were confused. Well, it's a strange story, to say the least, and it occurs so long ago, such an ancient tale, even before the time of Abraham. And it reflects this most ancient desire within human beings to locate God in a particular place and to find their own way, our own way, to get to the divine, to make our way to heaven. They built a tower, thinking, we will build a tower unto heaven, and that way we will be remembered and make a name for ourselves. It is an ancient impulse. This desire that we have, I think we first came upon it when we realized that God was far, far beyond us, that we had no control over God. And so this natural desire to be able to start constraining God, put God into some sort of a box where he can be managed. And so we do put little parts of God in half throughout the ages, said this stream is a sacred stream. Here you will find God. Or this tree is a sacred tree, and it's in this area that God resides. We do this by building temples, by building churches, too. We do it by locating God in sacred artifacts and in icons and in things like the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy of Holies, all resting places where we can put God. And it is our need to be able to box God in a bit, to know where God can be found, to know how we can get to them, and to know we have this kind of control, that we can build things that get us to heaven. We can design objects that make us closer to God. We retain some of that today. We do it by absolute necessity here in our church, and in fact in every church at every time and every place has said, listen, we've got to organize ourselves, we've got to get together for worship, and so let's decide on this time of the week when we are going to worship. It's going to be our sacred time, and here at our church it's 9:15 and 11:11 and 11:30, and these are the times when we come together and we worship as one people. And now that's good. That's good that we are organized, and it's wonderful that we come together to worship as one people, but it can be a struggle, because here it is, 9:15 to 10:15 on Sunday morning. We are coming here expecting to be inspired here in this little time, expecting the choir to be inspired, the elders to be inspired, the preacher to be inspired, all of us seeking this for inspiration and hoping that we can find it here in this hour. And again, absolute necessity, nothing wrong with that. The problem we get into is when we say, well, that's the hour for inspiration during the week. That's the hour for worship. It's Sunday at 9:15, and it's not Thursday or Saturday or Tuesday. Boy, that right there is a tower to heaven. And it is as fragile as the tower that those ancient folk built, thinking that this is the only time. And once we're done here, we can check the spirituality, we can check the time with God off our list. Oh boy, but we know how God tends to come to us at the most unexpected moments, at the most unexpected times. We don't want to fall for this particular Tower of Babel, to confine God to one particular moment, or to one particular place for that matter, or one particular object, thinking that, boy, if we can get away from that place, we can get away from God. We can do as we please. Now, it's one way that we can build our own Tower to Babel. But there are other ways as well. In fact, there are scores of them. There are so many little towers we can build in our lives, thinking that this tower is going to get us to meaning. It's going to get us to something to help us make sense of our lives. And we can build them out of the strangest material. I mean, we can see technology itself as a way to lift us up, not just as human beings, but lift us up into the divine. But we make the biggest mistake, I think, is when we start looking at a person and we see one particular person as our way to get there. Some person that we see on television, some person that we meet in our lives, some teacher, some preacher, some prophet, and they're up there high on a pedestal, and we think, well, here he is finally. Here is the guy that's going to get me there. It's going to get me to heaven. That's going to get me to the divine. And we repeat this story over and over and over, and we see it happening throughout our lives, and yet human beings keep building these same towers over and over again, these individuals that are supposed to solve every problem for us and get us closer to God, and we know what happens. When that is a human being, that tower is inevitably going to come tumbling down. And the only question is, how many people is this person going to take with them as they come crashing down once again? Let us build a tower of heaven. We are looking for this tower. When it comes to a person, it's so easy to see someone and think, that is the one person who can get me there, can get me closer to God, can get me closer to Jesus. I started thinking about this and thinking, it seems like there's one thing we have to keep an eye on. And that is when this teacher or this preacher or this prophet, when they become more the center than their group is. So their church, instead of us knowing the name of the church, we know the name of the person. And that is what the place is known by. Instead of, that's this particular church. No, not anymore. That is where this particular person preaches or teaches. And that can be a problem. Well, the ways these towers that we can build such towers is legion. So many ways that we think we can trick our way into the back door of heaven. Now, we can get there ourselves. We have what it takes to build this particular tower and get up to God. And what is the result of all of this? What is the result of building these towers and thinking that we're wise enough and smart enough and powerful enough to build what we need to build in order to get us to God? Well, one result we see right away is division. For we all start building our own individual towers. There they go, built on ideas, built on theories, built on beliefs, and up they go into heaven, and we start thinking, well, our tower is the best tower. It is the only tower. We see this within our church. Not our church in particular, but the church in general. This is the way that we have divided ourselves, not just a religion, but religions within the religion, churches within the church. We divide ourselves with language. We talk about things like sanctification and justification. We talk about rapture. We talk about fundamentalism and inerrancy. And all of these little building blocks that we can build our tower up with until finally our tower for us is just right. And what do? We start looking over the other person's tower, the other Christian's tower, and saying, oh, that's not good enough. We're divided because of it. How sad this is that we can divide ourselves just in this way. Building up these beliefs so that we're like a tower out there on our own. And there are all the other Christians, and we have divided ourselves from them. Because we are so certain that the way we designed our tower is just absolutely right. That is certainly one thing the building of these towers can lead to, and that is division. But inevitably, absolutely, what this is going to lead to is frustration and despair. For we can work all our lives to build up these towers of belief that we think can get ourselves up into heaven, can get ourselves into the presence of the divine. And we forget we are human. We are creatures. We are finite. We are mortal. In our quest to do what we need to do in order to get ourselves to heaven, we are destined to fail. This tower is destined, if it's all we rely on, to come tumbling down. These little towers of opinion that we build, and we can build them so tall that we believe it. We believe this is going to get me to God if I just build my tower just right, and yet no matter how high it just gets more and more fragile, and God, you never do get past that chasm that exists between us and God. It's one reason why we, here in the church, we don't build towers to heaven, do we? Churches today, we build towers, yes, and we build spires, and we build steeples, all of which not reaching to heaven, but what? What do? They point to heaven. And that is what we do here at the church. Never thinking that this church, this building, this organization, this group of people is what's going to get us into heaven. This isn't our tower that's going to reach heaven. It is a place, however, where we come and we say, we're going to bring you this far. We're going to bring you this far. And then we're going to point you to where the rest of the way is. And we'll point you in that direction. We'll get you there and get you inspired and get you singing, but we're not the ones who are finally going to get you past that gap between us and God. The church, as a people, what do? We point up. We don't have all the answers. We don't know all the mysteries. But there are some things we certainly do know. And the one thing that we know and we hold in our hearts most dearly of all is the one thing that should keep us from ever trying to find our own way or thinking we can earn our own way into heaven. That it's a ridiculous thing to do. And it's this: that God has already done it for us. That God has sent His Son, Jesus Christ, into this world. And so all of our work, all of our effort to try to get ourselves in, to try to make it in through some back door, it is not necessary. God has already come down in the person of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, the true light that enlightens the world. And to all who receive Him, He has given the power to become children of God. You see, our tower to heaven doesn't enable us to climb up to God. Rather, Jesus has brought God down to live with us in our hearts, in our midst. Here as we worship, the gap between us and God is not spanned by a tower or by a building or by a preacher or by a prophet. It is spanned by a Savior. And we are never so low. We are never so despairing that we are out of reach of Jesus Christ, that He will not reach down to us and bring us up again, no matter the depth of our despair. There's an old story about a church musician named Thomas Dorsey. He was quite famous in his day as a church musician, and he was often asked to go to Christian conventions and to play at them. And one day he was going from his home in Chicago to play at a convention in St. Louis. And he didn't want to go. His wife was 8 months pregnant, and he was worried about her. And something told him he shouldn't, but he felt obliged, and he went. And he played there one night, there at the convention. And as he was playing, a telegram came for him that said in the terrestrial words of the telegrams, "Your wife just died." He got on the phone immediately, and he called back to Chicago. And yes, it was true. His wife, Nettie, had died. And he quickly got on a train, and he returned to that city, and he found out that before she had died, she had given birth to a son, and he had shortly died also. So now Dorsey had 2 lives to grieve for. And during this painful time, he did what he often did. He sat down at the keyboard. And as he was sitting there, he said that something happened. That he suddenly found this profound closeness to God. He found an avenue to healing. He found hope for the future. It didn't end his despair at all, but it was just this great connection to the divine, as if God were reaching down there in his neediest moments and ministering to him. And then a tune came to him, and then the words flowed out. "Precious Lord, take my hand. Lead me on, let me stand. I am tired. I am weak. I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home." Well, this is the hymn we will close our worship with today. And as we give thanks, as we do, we give thanks for knowing that we can never fall low enough. We can never fall low enough. We can never get lost so completely that God is unable and unwilling to reach down and to grab the hands of his stubborn children and lead us home again. Let us bow. Loving God, we do give thanks that you do not require us to build towers to you, that you don't require us to follow a series of instructions in order to make our way into your presence, that you have come to us through your Son, Jesus Christ. Loving God, help us to feel this every day of the week, in every place that we visit, this opportunity we have to be inspired by you. This opportunity we have for you to touch our lives and to lift us up. Loving God, help us to feel this every day, that it may help us to be more and more the people that you have created us to be. It is in Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen. Friends, if you would like to join this church by coming forward and confessing your faith in Jesus Christ, or by transferring your membership here to this church, I would invite you to do so now during the singing of our hymn of invitation. Come forward and join with this church. Let us stand now as we sing our hymn.